If you knew nuclear war was coming, what would you be willing to do to escape?
Wander with us. I'm Bethany,
I'm still Connor.
and this is Wander with Us.
We're talking about the Twilight Zone.
Episode 14.
Third from the Sun.
This one was trippy.
This is one of those episodes that for me makes you wonder, were they writing a TV show or were they all just intensely paranoid?
Bit of both, if you take historical context into consideration. The 1960s, which is when this episode aired, was the first one in
Yes, it is
1960.
our first 1960 episode.
Americans at that time had a lot going on. I mean, really, the world did, because you had the nuclear powers. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a thing that was prevalent on people's minds. They
The
were all-
question is, were the missiles made of aluminium?
I don't know. Is that something, a reference I'm supposed to get?
I'm just mocking you for missiles.
Oh, that's fine. I get it a lot. It's okay. But they were. I mean, nuclear war was a big thing that was on everybody's mind, and so I mean, it makes perfect sense given historical context that yes, people
That it was also on the mind of
in
Rod
the
Serling
episode would
and
be paranoid.
Richard Matheson.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So we do, in fact, we have we got. This is yet another episode that was converted to teleplay by Rod Serling. Originally written by Richard Matheson,
And he did a few, like 14?
like 14 or 15
episodes.
episodes that he wrote that were based on short stories that he wrote.
Mhm.
Whether or not those short stories were intended for the Twilight Zone, I don't know. I doubt it, as Richard Matheson, most of his criteria was movies based on short stories and books.
Mhm.
I've actually got some interesting. We're already here. Might as well. So Richard Matheson wrote the short story that this one is based on, as well as several other ones. He also he had a whole slew of writing credits to his name, including Stir of Echoes, The Box, Real Steel, The Twilight Zone, obviously, all iterations of the Twilight Zone up through the current or the 2019 reboot.
Oh, really?
They did a couple of episodes, including Nightmare at 20,000 Feet.
Because I knew about him being involved in the 1983 reboot. I didn't know that he went up to. This
Well,
most
he
recent
is
one.
still credited as having written the original stories that some of the episodes were based
okay,
on.
so they just
They-
credited him carrying it forward.
Yeah, he obviously wasn't working on it at the time,
Sure.
since he died in 2013.
Okay.
But he is still credited in the current running, reiteration of the Twilight Zone.
Mhm.
The most interesting thing I found about him is that one of my favorite movies was based on a novel of
Which
his
one?
by the same name of I Am Legend.
Oh, was that the Will Smith?
Will Smith in a world full of internet argument time, zombies or vampires.
Hey, I knew that one. I get points for that, right?
You get points for that. And just in case you're listening, audience, they were supposed to be vampires.
What year was that? Is it 2007?
Yeah,
that
so
make
I Am Legend came out in 2007. The most interesting part of that is that the movie I Am Legend was not the only movie based on the novel I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. Because we had the first one being The Last Man on Earth
Okay.
was a movie based on I Am Legend, which was released in 1964.
Was that the cover of the book from the first episode?
I wondered, it's not the same artwork, although I suspect there may have been something. I think we need to go back and see
like
if
a
Matheson
connection.
had anything to do with. So I know that Time Enough at Last was based on. Not Time Enough at Last. Yeah, Time Enough at Last was based on a short story by somebody. It wasn't Time Enough at Last where we saw that, though. It was
Where is everybody? First
Where Is
episode.
Everybody? And I don't remember any notes about whether or not that one was based on a short story.
I remember that we looked up that because that was a freeze frame for us. We paused it and was like, "Hey, look at
Yeah,
that."
I recall
We
the
did
the book.
research on that, but nothing came up. I think
No,
we
the
were
only
looking
thing
for
we
the original
found was
title.
the prop
Mhm.
or several props from the show that were available on eBay for insane amounts of money.
That would be interesting if they were connected.
That would make me very happy. So yeah, we got The Last Man on Earth, released in 1964, was based on I Am Legend. Pardon my very, very poor Spanish here, but Soy Leyenda?
Mhm.
I don't know. Released in 67, a short film also based on I Am Legend, the novel. We have The Omega Man, which was released in 1971, also based on I Am Legend. And then we have I Am Omega, was a hour and a half short film based on I Am Legend that came out the same year as the movie I Am Legend,
Okay.
starring Will Smith. I didn't find any connection
Come out in,
between any
like,
of them.
Was it like a game format? Because that's what it sounds like. I Am Omega. It sounds like a video game.
No, it was a. I don't want to call it a full film because by the looks of it, it wasn't. It looked
Just
like
like
a
a
low
short.
budget short film
Okay.
based on the novel that came out this. Maybe coincidentally, maybe not, came out the same year as the movie I Am Legend,
Okay.
which obviously shares its title with the original novel. So yeah, I don't know. I found that interesting. I don't know if it's a normal thing for several people over the course of almost 50 years to make movies all based on the same novel, or if this one was of particular interest because it's such a good book or because it was such a renowned book.
I'd like to say it was just that good that they had to keep it going.
Well, I won't argue with that. The book is phenomenal, although of the versions that I have seen, Will Smith killed it.
Sure.
You ain't gonna get no better than Will Smith, although
that
the
just
director's cut
due-
is the only way to go.
Is that just due to modern movie magic?
What, Will Smith's ability to kill it?
No.
No,
Oh, no.
I mean,
The quality of the film and why you
Well,
so highly regard it.
I highly regard it because it's a great story.
Mhm.
I highly regard the movie because Will Smith is a great actor, and I hate everybody and everything involved because the dog died. Spoilers.
Sure. I need to rewatch it. It's been a while. So he did those things.
Yeah, moving on. Next we have the producer, Buck Houghton, in this one, or as he was known to the rest of the world, Archibald Ernest Houghton Jr. was his full name. Went by Buck, can't imagine why.
Uh-huh. It's a mouthful.
Yeah, he was another one, man. He was born in 1915, died in 99. Had a lot of things credited to him as a producer. The only thing I saw that I recognized was Hawaii Five-0.
Huh.
And Hawaii Five-0 pops up so many times in this cast listing.
Really? They all had some sort of role or connection?
Most of them had some connection to the 1960-something release of Hawaii Five-0, which I think was the original.
Huh.
Most of them worked on Hawaii Five-0 at some point, even if it was just 1 or 2 episodes.
So is this essentially the sort of same
This is the
headhunty
Bonanza thing that we were talking
gunsmoke
about last week.
Bonanza?
Because again, we have several characters who were in Gunsmoke.
Mhm.
We have several characters from this episode that were in Bonanza, and then we have several characters that worked on Rawhide.
Anybody in Star Trek? Because that was a big
Yeah,
player
we got
last
we got one who was in Star Trek Deep Space
week. Okay.
in '94, and that was Fritz, who plays our lead character.
Okay.
In 1994, he was in an episode of Star Trek Deep Space. Whatever. I like lightsabers, folks. Don't hate me. I'm not a Trekkie.
Sure. I don't understand any of that. It's fine.
Point being, we yet again have a cast list full of people who in the same general time span throughout the 60s and the early 70s were working on the same shows.
Hmm.
And we've seen this repeating since episode 1. Maybe not episode 1, although I want to say he was on Bonanza.
That sounds right.
But I don't know. I don't know what the casting industry looked like back then. I don't know if we've just got more casting agencies, more people willing to work now.
Yeah, it seems
I
like
don't.
it'd
It
be
may
more,
be. It may be the exact same thing now.
more widespread, and it's just not
It feels
as
like
closely
it.
grouped
Yeah.
as it was then.
But again, I don't know. I haven't checked the casting list of anything recently. We might find Chris Hemsworth. Chris Hemsworth, is that his name? Hemsworth,
Was that Thor?
Captain America, Thor.
Yeah.
Which one is he? Which one is Chris?
Chris? Thor. I think he's Thor.
Hold for research, please,
This
because
is,
I'm about to discredit the living shit out of myself.
I mean, this is very new to me. I'm very new to the Marvel universe.
I know. I'm so excited.
I can't actually give you a definitive answer on that.
Haha, he's Thor. Chris Evans is Captain America. That's why I was getting him confused.
Same name.
Don't at me. Point being, we might find out that Hemsworth or Chris Evans have been in 1,000 other movies other than the Marvel universe. Like I don't think I have ever seen Chris Evans as anything but Captain America.
Mhm.
But I might be wrong. It's entirely possible that his filmography encapsulates, I don't imagine he started working in movies as the lead in Captain America.
No, they always.
It seems unlikely.
They tend to start small and build up.
And Evans got a face for rom-com.
Yeah,
Like you take him out of cap suit,
Right.
that's fine. He got that rom-com face.
I would agree with that.
He got that Ryan Reynolds but less pretentious face.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, we got to get to Deadpool and unfortunately Green Lantern at some point, although not.
Yeah, they're on another list for another time. But we're
Green
talking
Lantern
about
shouldn't be.
episode 14.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, cinematography's a new one. New one today. We got Harry J. Wild.
Oh, not
yeah,
Clemens.
not a Clemens.
Sad. He
I
did some
don't know
interesting
why
stuff,
that is.
too.
Wild.
If you hadn't have told me that it wasn't George, it would have been obvious that it was different because there are a few things that I wanted to point out a little bit later, and I know I'm totally stepping on your toes here because
Nah, bring it on. Bring
you
it
got the
on.
production notes, but just there were a few specific shots, like weird camera angles and such, and I did a little bit of research on that because it's a thing. And
There were a
this-
lot of very interesting decisions made on the cinematography front
that
on
was
this episode.
very distinctly not George T. Clemens.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Recognizable as not a Clemens.
Yeah.
From step one.
So that sort of differentiated him, I think, and that's cool. I'm glad that there's a new person up to bat. Although I will still forever champion on George T. Clemens because he's great.
Oh, absolutely. Excuse
who
me. So
else?
we got a little bit of information on Wild
Mhm.
before we move on, and I say a little bit because a little bit. He was born 1901, July of 1901. Died February of 1961. Poor guy
Long
died in
life.
L.A.
Yeah,
He was only 59 years old.
young.
I mean, our director Richard Bear, and that man was 101 when he died.
Yeah.
Like 59's a pretty early death for. I mean,
The time.
he was born in 1901. Like we had some medicine by then. I don't know what medicine we had, but I'm sure we had something.
Right.
Probably
right,
not
yeah.
penicillin. I don't know when was. You know when penicillin was
I
invented?
don't. This isn't Sawbones, though. so-
God, I love Sawbones. Sydney, thank you for teaching me. As if you'll ever hear this. Justin, thank you for being amazing. Travis, I love your beard. You're not on Sawbones.
We have did our obligatory shout outs to the McElroy.
We ain't got Griffin yet.
Okay,
Griffin,
go on.
thank you for balance.
Indeed.
Thank you for balance, sir. Wipe my eye. No, so director Harry J. Wild, like I said, died less than 60 years old, which is unfortunate. The most interesting thing I found on our director of photography, Harry J. Wild, was that he had 125 cinematography credits to his
Wow.
name and 26 uncredited appearances,
Uh-huh.
mostly in the vein of cameraman, assistant camera,
Okay,
secondary
so not
camera.
like cameos.
No, clearly his early work when he was
Here,
getting
get,
into the
get
industry.
my good side.
Yeah, I couldn't find a single picture of Harry J. Wild, and I imagine that's why he worked behind the camera.
Sure.
But the most interesting thing I found was that he was best known for The Twilight Zone,
Mm-hmm.
despite the fact that this is the first time we're seeing him.
Yeah.
And fuck all else. Like he had a slew of things to his name. He did a lot of work. I was reading through that. I read through that list of 125 credits and that list of 26 credits. I didn't recognize a single thing except for The Twilight Zone. Like this was a list of just based on my very quick search, and I recognize that this is an ignorant statement that is uneducated, low budget bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Just based on what I could see. However, researching him led me down a beautiful rabbit hole that I'm not going to go dive too deep into. But he was working on a movie called Animal Kingdom in 1932. He was the assistant camera, was
Okay.
his uncredited role in that, which led me to an actress who played in that named Myrna Loy.
Mm-hmm.
Myrna, Myrna,
Yeah.
Loy.
Sure.
Boy.
Okay.
And that chick had a fascinating career
Okay.
that I'm not going to go into because she's not on the Twilight Zone. But the more you know, the more you learn.
What was the thing though about the missing film reel?
So apparently Animal Kingdom was thought to be lost for a lot of years
Mm-hmm.
until somebody who was looking for missing film from a different movie found this movie along with some other stuff like in some dude's basement.
Huh.
And it just popped up. This dude's like, "Hey, look at this film reel I
Ancient
found.
film reel.
Like, look at this terrible silent movie I came across."
And that's how it came to light.
And that's how it came back to light. Yeah.
Huh.
I want to say the only review I found on it said something to the effect of slow moving and uninteresting.
Not great.
Not a great review, but Myrna Loy, without having seen any of her work other than some still shots from this, had a fascinating early life and early career,
Mm-hmm.
and I think y'all should look her up. She's worth reading about.
The more you know down the rabbit hole segment of our podcast. I like that.
We could definitely do a segment just called Down the Rabbit Hole,
Well, because
and
I know
I think we should.
that like when I'm doing production notes, I will spend hours. I could easily spend hours doing it because one thing, like I'll be focused on the episode and then I'll trail off like you did, and I will wind up 3, 4, 5 different people later and know all these fascinating things about their life that have nothing to do with the Twilight Zone. But I've
Oh,
spent it was a
absolutely.
great hour spent of my life that I don't regret.
I mean, yeah, I got off work and could have had production notes for this episode done in about a half an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And because of director of photography Harry Wild being the assistant camera on a movie called Animal Kingdom in 1932 that was lost for generations
Yeah.
and happened to have an actress named Myrna Loy in it, I spent 4 hours on production notes.
That is the way it goes.
Absolute bonkers. And
So-
we're not talking about her.
Essentially, what I'm saying, guys, is that we are really well prepared for this generally. I know that
Typically speaking, we
sometimes
just
it doesn't translate very well when
God,
we
the
actually
rabbit holes.
record. But man, we do our research here. We do, I promise.
hear that cool guy drive by.
Yeah, I want to be that cool.
God, I hope he came up on the mic. All right, so that's our essential cast. What do we got?
that being the crew, what made this thing happen?
Not the entirety of it by any means, by any means, but a fair chunk of them.
All right, so opening scene. The lighting on this isn't too different than a majority of what we've seen. It's a standard pan shot of a military and or governmental facility.
Hard to tell.
So we just see a huge chain link fence and it looks somewhat industrial until they kind of get closer and get into it. But then there are two seemingly government officials taking a roll call of sorts of personnel leaving the facility.
As people leave,
Yeah.
not as they come in, which was the interesting part, which is what
Right.
caught my attention.
And they have these badges on their uniforms essentially, and so they're just kind of calling out their name and where they work, what they do in this facility
And checking their ID.
as they leave. And then it kind of goes through that, and they don't bore you too long with that. It goes through like 3 or 4 people, and then we see our main character, William Sturka,
Who is just referred to as Sturka for the majority of the
and
episode.
for the purpose of fluidity here, I'm going to refer to them as they're called in the series
Sure.
or in this episode. So it'll be Sturka, and then later on we'll meet some more people. But so Sturka is lighting a cigarette, and as he's standing there lighting his cigarette, we are introduced to the antagonist, who is called Carling, and they have a bit of conversation. But can you tell me a little bit about Mr. Sturka? Who was
about
he really?
Mr. Sturka. So William Sturka, or Sturka, as we
Sturka. There's an R
Sturka?
in there. I missed it.
An R and a T, is played by Fritz Weaver. Fritz being my favorite name that is in this cast list. Born January 26, died November of 2016. He was 90.
So 1926?
Yeah, 1920s wasn't 2026.
No. I'm just
It's only 2020. Yeah, he was born 1926, died 2016. He was 90 years old. He had a slew of things that he was in. I mean, he was one of them that was in both Rawhide and Gunsmoke. He was in the made-for-TV movie The Legend of Lizzie Borden.
okay.
Played Lizzie's father. Again, he was on Hawaii Five-0 for a couple episodes. Murder, She Wrote, the TV adaptation of Friday the 13th. He was the one that was in Star Trek Deep Space Not Lightsabers. He was on The X-Files, Frasier, Law and Order.
Wow.
And then as far up as the movie We'll Never Have Paris and The Cobbler
okay.
with Adam Sandler in 2014.
That's recent.
Yeah.
Wow. So this guy
And
had
then
a
he died
super,
2 years later.
super long career.
Yeah, and I'm only scraping the surface of the things that he did. That was just the things that jumped out and stuck out as like memorable, like, hey, that's Adam Sandler. Hey, they don't have lightsabers, the notable stuff.
Was he a lifelong actor? Was he one of those that just started like in film right away and just hit the road?
So I don't know. I didn't grab any notes of his early work because frankly I didn't recognize any of it.
Sure.
So the earliest I grabbed was Rawhide in '64. Yeah, that he worked long enough. Even if he just worked 64 through 14, I would call that a lifelong acting career.
For sure.
So
I mean,
whether or not he started
got
at
it.
the age of 12, I don't know. He wound up there and he did it for a long ass time.
And apparently did it well.
Yeah, I mean,
Credited quite a bit.
I recognize, looking back, I recognize his character from The Cobbler. I recognize his character from The Legend of Lizzie Borden. I've never seen We'll Never Have Paris, although I understand it has one of the dudes from Big Bang Theory in it.
Is it a rom-com?
It
sounds like
certainly
a rom-com.
looks like a rom-com.
I'm gonna have to look it up.
Did you ever watch Big Bang Theory?
No.
Oh, then you won't.
Yeah.
There's the only thing I've ever seen this guy in, but he's apparently
Surprise,
the lead
surprise!
actor.
Don't get the reference.
I mean, there wasn't so much a reference as just like mentioning it.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan, but that's the only other thing I've seen the lead character from We'll Never Have Paris in.
Sure.
He was one of the guys in Big Bang Theory. It's fine. Yeah, so he had a fairly large career. And as far as I could find, The Cobbler was the last thing he worked on.
Okay.
And he was, I think at that point, he was like 88.
Yeah.
So,
He's winding down.
I hope most of us are at that point.
And then
And then Carling,
yeah.
who is the second one we're introduced to here, was played by Edward Andrews. He was another one with a lot of credits to his name, like 180 something, 185, I think, credits to his name. Born October of 2014. Fuck off, Connor. Born in October of 1914, died in 1985, so he was only 70. Another one, he was on Rawhide. He was on Gunsmoke. He was also on the Alfred Hitchcock Hour.
We should just start referring to those as the big three: Gunsmoke, Bonanza, Rawhide. Because I feel
mean,
like they're going to come up a
That's
lot.
fine, and he meets the criteria of the big three, but I don't think we can stop there because we have yet another Hawaii Five-O.
Ooh.
So I mean, maybe that's the big four for now. We got
Scan it out to the big six and just hit any one of the six.
yeah. I mean, if you hit one of the six, you were in the big six, and that's what matters.
Sure.
Because Edward hit Rawhide 61 through 62. He was on a couple episodes. Gunsmoke in 65. Bonanza in 71. He was also on the Andy Griffin Show. Hawaii Five-O in 1970. Sanford and Sons apparently for an episode in 1976.
So he made an appearance.
Yeah, I mean, I don't never watched Sanford and Sons. I don't know. He was a character on it.
Okay.
And then he was in 16 Candles in 84.
Huh. That
So-
one I am familiar with. Surprise.
Hey, there you go.
Hey. Sorry, did you say his name was Edward Andrews?
Yes, Edward
Okay.
Andrews.
Can I make a note on his character
If you must.
in this?
No, please
He
do. He's a
doesn't-
fascinatingly dull character.
So he's the antagonist, i.e., the villain. In
He's
this
that big old
particular
bad guy.
episode. But he
He's going to
doesn't.
huff and puff and
his-
blow your
His
safety
face,
down.
his face, and his facial expressions do not strike me as menacing bad guy.
No, he's got the face of a dad.
Yeah.
Like, he
There-
looks like he should be
jolly.
playing. So, the impression I got from him is he looks like the dad in a romantic comedy
Mhm.
who greets the daughter's new boyfriend
Mhm.
while the daughter's new boyfriend is like terrified that dad's gonna be mean and scary, and he like opens the door and hugs him and like goes out and buys him a beer or something because he wants to be the cool dad.
Right.
That's the
Yeah.
face he's got.
Yeah. But he's the villain here.
He certainly does not have a face that screams like I'm out for evil deeds.
Mhm. It becomes very clear right off the bat that he's the antagonist because when he and Sturka are having conversation, so Sturka lights a cigarette, and then Carlin comes up and says, "Hey, hold that light," and so he turns and he lights his cigarette for him, and they're just kind of shooting the shit, like they're talking about some sort of impending doom, which I didn't catch the entirety of that conversation because I'll be honest, I was doing this really quick. But
Folks, you'll remember that she said we're usually super prepared for this, not 4
Yes.
minutes ago.
I did, and I meant that. I did not write down word for word what their conversation was. The gist of it was
iTunes reviews, folks, we're gonna need them.
we do need them. The gist of it was that they were talking about nuclear attack, right?
Yes, yeah. Specifically, I believe he was talking about the fact that they, I assume, being Sturka and Carling's country or government or something, had made the first attack against somebody.
Starting a war.
The implication was starting a war, yeah, and that the I don't know, it was very odd the way that Carling was speaking about the fact that they had sent bombs somewhere else starting this. They had got the first punches in.
Would you say it was specifically vague? So they don't.
It was certainly intentionally vague, as the
Like-
bit of information we get at the end
Like the
would have been
idea-
given away immediately if it hadn't been that vague.
Sure. The idea was specific, but the conversation surrounding the idea was vague.
Yes, very much so.
Serling, in his beautiful way of narration,
Brain daddy.
you need to get that button done.
Just get a brain daddy button.
It needs to happen. Excuse me. So Serling kind of packages this up in his opening narration and says, "This is the eve of the end." So there's an indicator there. If you didn't catch it all throughout this very brief conversation, which we meet the first two characters, that is, okay, so we're preparing for something. The very next scene is Sturka coming home from work, and we see his living room, and it's kind of futuristic, the furniture, and I guess that's kind of where they've set it up. Like, this could be anywhere. But there was one thing in particular that I actually paused on because I was like, what is that in the background? And it kind of panned over very quickly, but there's a telephone sitting on one of the tables.
Terribly, terribly futuristic looking device.
Yeah, to the like it drew my attention, not really knowing what it was.
I did not identify it as a phone.
So I looked it up because I needed to know what this thing was, if it was just a prop for this, and it was. It was a Swedish model telephone that was used in Sweden, but it was unavailable in the U.S. at that time, and so they specifically got one to use on this set so that it would look more futuristic. Like they have a phone that's not.
They nailed it.
Yeah.
Because this phone appears to be what you would design if you went to IKEA and said, I want an old rotary telephone, but I want it to look like a flower vase, and I want it to be so white that my grubby fingers will guarantee it never looks new again.
Yeah. Well, the one in the living room was white. They also had one in the bedroom.
They did.
It was a different color. Well, darker than white. Black and white film. I would assume it was like a maroon because it wasn't solidly black in a black and white film.
God, maroon is a ballsy guess.
I mean, that's
like that is such a swing out of left field. That fucking phone might have been purple, which I guess would technically be a shade of maroon. It's fine. Moving on.
So they pan through the living room. It's kind of futuristic. That's cool. And then we meet Jody, who is Sturka's daughter. And they have, was it a turntable that the music was playing on? Because like he reached his hand in to turn the thing off.
So it looked and sounded like a turntable-ish. It certainly didn't look like a turntable that I've...
Another one of those.
Thank you for your input, Callie. Certainly not a turntable that I've ever seen in person.
Okay.
It very well could have been a Swedish design turntable that got so it would look futuristic and from IKEA.
Is that the purpose? You think that they were trying? That was just another thing that they were making?
I think that was just another thing where they were trying to show us that this is not present day. Hey, you can't be under the table. You're going to bump the mic stand.
Go on.
Yeah, go on. Go. Or just lay down. I don't care either way. So yeah, I think that was just their attempt to, again, establish like this is not present day.
Sure.
This is future time. These are future humans.
Mm-hmm. So who is Jody?
So Jody Sturka was played by Denise Alexander, born November of 1939, the only cast member of this particular episode that is still alive, according to the research.
Interesting.
And she had a interesting and a fresh way career in that she is fairly well known for a couple of TV shows, including General Hospital and Days of Our Lives. But she was also on the television show Combat in 1963, which a couple of our other characters are in, and The Virginian, which a couple of our other characters are in.
Mm-hmm.
She was also in The Inn in 2013. Sweep her under the rug.
How old is she now?
Oh, I don't know. 2020 minus 1939.
I can't math.
Years old.
Okay, so she's old.
She's getting up there. The most interesting thing I found about her career, and I don't know if this is abnormal for soap opera actors, or if this is just like a super normal thing and I'm super ignorant to them, but she is credited with 113 episodes of General Hospital.
Whoa. Being the same character?
No, several characters on General Hospital. However, on Days of Our Lives, she is credited for 1,454 episodes as the same character.
That's quite a few.
Spanning like the 60s through late 90s or early 2000s.
Dang.
I wasn't even aware that Days of Our Lives was on in the 60s. Like, I thought that was born out of terrible taste in TV sometime in the early 90s. I had no idea that that was just bleed over that we refused to let die.
Huh. That is really interesting. This long-standing single character of
Well-
a terrible, I'm assuming, terrible soap opera.
There are people who love it. I've
I
watched it.
I haven't, so I don't actually have an opinion on this.
I have an opinion, and I ain't got nothing nice to say.
Okay.
With that said, 1,454 episodes of the same show is impressive as all hell.
Sure.
At least to me.
Yeah.
I never saw Drew Carey's acting list, but I don't think he ever reached that.
It would be a hard one to match.
I don't think Drew Carey's old enough to have done that many episodes of anything.
No.
And he's what, like 60?
Ish.
Sorry, Drew.
I don't know.
But yeah, I mean that's essentially Denise Alexander. She's still working today. Allegedly, you can get a hold of her agent and you can book her if you need to.
Hey,
And she aged well.
that's
She
good.
aged well.
That's good.
Looks
Some
all right
Hollywood
for
magic in there.
130.
All right, so we see Jody, and she gets all jolly that her dad's home and says, we have to have our dance because that's apparently a thing they did. And
I'm going to make this brief because I don't want to focus on it. There is something incredibly uncomfortable about the relationship between those two.
so
in
it
this
wasn't just
episode.
me.
No, it wasn't just
Okay.
you. And if you're listening, we hadn't talked about this.
No.
But no, there is something incredibly uncomfortable about that entire thing.
Yeah.
Like there is weird
It's a
contact. There's
weird
weird.
Closeness.
There's
It's not. Yeah.
yeah.
It was very.
Huh.
It felt very off color. Anywho, she tells her dad, I want to hear about your day, but we have to have our dance. He responds by shutting the music off and going and sitting on the
Yep.
couch.
Maybe later.
hmm And this is where we get the first mention of Sturka's actual work outside of what we've seen from where he works. She mentions that, he works on all these different types of bombs. She starts naming them off, hydrogen bombs and all of these things. And then she goes on to everyone I've talked to and everyone that's talked to me is afraid. Like everyone is afraid. What are they afraid of?
It's in the air.
Yeah, she kept saying there's something in the air. And to that, Sturka responds by saying, people are afraid because they make themselves afraid. And he's sort of
He
dismissive.
has a very weird switch of emotion in
Yeah.
this brief moment.
So initially he's dismissive about it, like, I don't want to talk about work. And then he becomes, how would you describe that? He becomes very
Frantic,
frantic is a good one, like mildly frantic.
mildly frantic, or like a conspiracy theorist that knows that nobody believes him.
Frustrated.
Very frustrated.
Because then he just kind of jumps up off the couch abruptly and was like sort of rambling.
Yep, gives us a nice Days of Our Lives
Yeah.
emotional moment by the fireplace.
And then he, just as quickly as that rant began, he changes the subject very, very abruptly
Very abruptly.
and tells his family that their friends are coming over for a card game.
Yeah, actually tells his wife to invite them over.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it wasn't like a pre-planned thing.
It certainly comes across like a pre-planned
Like,
thing.
hey, we've talked about it, but just for common courtesy, you should invite them over.
Yeah, I don't know. The
Anyway,
50s were weird.
They're planning a card game, like perfectly normal Tuesday night. And then he heads upstairs to their bedroom.
See, there is direct reference at that moment where Lori Sturka mentions that Jerry, the best friend,
Eve
Eve
Sturka
Sturka,
is his wife's name.
played by Lori March,
Yeah, I do it
Gotcha.
all the time.
mentions that Jerry was out of town testing a new aircraft.
Right, he was up north.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's really that's all we know about Jerry at this point.
was that he was up north testing some sort of new
Some
aircraft.
some sort of aircraft.
So Sturka heads upstairs, and then his wife Eve follows him. And as she follows him, he begins to divulge some information to her, about this impending event that's going to occur. He describes it as a Holocaust, and it will wipe out life as they know it. So they're leaving.
Yeah.
Like, done deal. Like this thing is happening. Our world is going to be destroyed, and we are leaving tonight.
We are getting out.
This is why I've invited Jerry and his wife, whose name I don't have.
Anne.
Okay.
Anne,
This is why we've invited Jerry and Ann over, because you, me, and Jody, and those two
Jerry and Anne.
we're leaving. So then we see Jerry. He pops up, and he comes over before the card game. Do you have any information on either Eve or Jerry? Because I've kind of flown through this.
So Eve, not so much. She's played by Laurie March, born 1923, died 2013, at 90 years old. She was obviously on Twilight Zone, the Alfred Hitchcock Presents in 58. Perry Mason, she was on for a while. I don't know what it is, but I've heard my dad talk about it, so I'm sure it's a thing. And then Jerry, right. Jerry Ryden, played by Joe Morose. I don't know, Joe, I don't know how to pronounce your last name. I'm sorry, dog. Joe Morose, born February 23, died in 09 at the age of, I didn't write that down, and I'm not about to do that math.
That's fine.
So we got ourselves another one who was on Big Ol' 3. We got Bonanza in 60. We got Gunsmoke for 3 episodes. We got Hawaii Five-0. Obviously, The Twilight Zone. He was another one on Alfred Hitchcock Presents. I wrote down TOL as something he was on. I don't know what that is. And then he was on Murder, She Wrote in 86.
Okay.
So he worked a fair amount. Some notable roles, mostly TV.
Okay, cool. So Jerry stops by before their scheduled card game under the guise of fixing his watch. So he comes over and he looks like he's really holding back.
He looks absolutely frantic.
But he's frantic, but he's trying not to make a scene.
Oh yeah, he's definitely hiding it well. He's got the appearance of a man who is afraid he is being watched.
Yeah. So, while Sturka and Eve are talking upstairs, the doorbell rings. Jody yells from the downstairs that Jerry's here, and so Sturka goes downstairs, and they, start talking, and this sense of urgency here is very prevalent, and so Sturka takes him and talks to him about his watch. Well, we got to get that fixed. It's probably just rust in the gears. Come on, I'll fix it for you.
Rust in that mainspring or some shit.
Yeah. So he takes him to what I assume is the basement or garage of their house.
Yeah.
Another room in their house.
Based on the height of the window, I'm going to say it was a basement garage.
Sure. And so he starts talking, and Jerry starts talking, and then Sturka stops him and flips on a bunch of machines to make a bunch of noise. And that's interesting.
So he flips on a machine that initially I thought I would recognize because I thought it looked familiar. And just now going back and looking, I'm a little irritated because I cannot for the life of me figure out what it is. It doesn't look particularly futuristic.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a busted ass old drill.
It's meant to be a noisemaker, so.
Well, it certainly does that. It is fucking obnoxious.
So he turns on the noisemaker. After that happens, Jerry informs him that the pilot that they had made arrangements with to leave for that night has changed his shift, and it's not going to be the guard. So it's not going to be the same person, so they have a little bit of a change in plan. And he said, okay, well, then we're not going to leave at 11. We'll leave at 7. We'll leave before 7. We'll make it earlier than we had planned to leave.
So originally it was they were going to leave between 1 and 2. And the guard they had paid had changed his shift and was now getting off at 11. So they had to be there before 11.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right, because they asked Jerry to come over at 7 for cards. So that's
I am
7-11.
relying on your memory here.
It happens.
Thank you.
Yeah. It helps that I've seen this episode several times.
So they discuss those plans, and after this conversation, they're done talking, and then we just see Carling pop up,
from the window,
his
just like a prairie dog, just
in the window,
beep.
making it apparent that he has heard the whole thing.
Well, I don't know if we heard it. He was definitely trying to hear it, but that machine was very loud.
He was present, so
I'm just giving Starker the benefit of the doubt that his turn on one machine and then talk quietly in a corner method was effective.
okay, it is. Yes. So the very next shot that we get is this super weird slanted camera angle. So the very next shot that we get is this super weird slanted camera angle. And the cinematographer, what was his name again?
Harry J. Wild.
Harry J. Wild utilizes this thing very often in this episode, and the technique is called the Dutch tilt technique, and I looked it up.
Which is super misleading.
Yeah, because it was a German thing that was used. It was a technique that was used in German cinema, and when they started coming to Hollywood in the 1920s, they started implementing that into their films in America, and it was really, really big in the film noir genre, where to emphasize or to get across, that there's panic or something is wrong or something is going to happen or somebody is mad, they would sort of turn the camera on its axis so that it wasn't facing a proper a proper direction. They would angle it in such a way to convey, that something is gone wrong, something is awry. And he utilizes that here where we see them at the card table, and it's just a slow pan of each of their faces, and they're calling their cards, they're saying the numbers of their cards.
So if you've ever seen that 70s show did this a lot, where they would essentially set the camera up in front or in the middle of a circle of people, of the cast, and they would pan in a complete circle, which is what this shot reminded me of. Was Eric Hyde, Fez, Kelso getting stoned to shit in the basement.
Sure. I haven't seen it, so I don't know.
I'm going to file paperwork.
I mean, I have seen that, because isn't that in the introduction of the show?
It's in every episode as far as I know.
Okay, but they do it in the beginning, because if that's the case, then I've seen that. I know what you're talking about, is what I'm saying. With the pan of the faces, I got it. Yeah.
Listeners, if you could hear the face I am giving my wife right now.
I'm trying to ignore it and move on. Herman's music in this also creates another level of...
Was this a Herman?
I think so. I believe Herman did the music.
I didn't take notes on music because the music didn't catch my attention in this one.
Well, it usually doesn't change, but this was a Bernard Herman. Yeah. His
Bernard,
original...
You're off your game, homie.
This was an original non-stock music. He composed this, and he did this particular scene very, very well, because in addition to the way the camera is moving, the music adds to it, and I thought it was great.
Agreed. In this scene, most of the episode, it's dull and unremarkable.
Sure. So they're going around the table, and then the ladies, there's a silent exchange between Sturka and Eve, his wife, and he kind of nods at her, and she looks at Anne and says, who wants fresh baked cake and lemonade? And they get up, and as she's walking past, she yells to Jodie, "Come on, lady, let's go." And they go, and they are bringing out cake and lemonade, which, given the tension of the room, that, I don't know.
It's a very harsh
juxtaposition
of the amount of tension at this table. The clearly we're all playing this card game because we have to be doing something.
Right.
None of us want to be here playing this stupid card game. Followed by what is obviously a forced attempt at normality.
Yeah.
By Eve Sturka in this. Let's get lemonade and cake, and
right.
let's bring Anne along, and let's bring Jodie along. It's just it's a harsh edge in the middle of this line.
Yes, and it's everybody feigning normalcy when facing impending doom that they obviously know is going to happen.
With the exception of Jodie, who at this
yes.
point doesn't know anything.
To be fair, she's a child.
That child is going to go on to be in 1,400 episodes. of what I can only describe as the most dull show I've ever seen.
I mean her character. That's what I meant. Her character
I'm just saying,
in
show
this
Jody a little
episode
respect.
is a child.
She's still alive right now.
Fair enough. So once they leave to go get the cake and lemonade,
Thank you for your service.
Jerry then pulls out a map. At least I think it's a map.
It's some
It's-
kind of math equation.
It's an equation. But the reason I called it a map is because he's like pointing out, like, I figured it out. This is where we need to go. And so he's kind of starting to break down this equation to Sturka. And then the doorbell rings. And as the doorbell rings, oh my gosh, Eve. Eve goes to the door and
That's
says,
right. I've been calling her Lori this entire episode.
we can hear her from the background. Mr. Carling is here. And then Jerry and Sturka both like have that look. They look at each other like, oh shit.
that we done fucked up
We
look.
gonna be caught.
Keeping in
And-
mind, Jerry is still holding this piece of paper with
Yeah.
what we now know based on their reaction is some information they are not supposed to have.
Right. So then we get this really phenomenal shot of Jerry puts the piece of paper face down. And this is a glass table they're sitting around. So the camera is looking up through the glass table. And so we, as the viewer, see Sturka and Jerry sitting next to each other. And then behind them is,
Looming over them.
yes,
Like a dark force ready to drop on their heads.
with a maniacal smile.
Ugh. Mr.
He
Wild.
is
Mr. Wild.
phenomenal.
Thank you.
So Carling is looming over them, and we, as the viewer, can see the coordinates on the map through the table.
While Jerry's
He's
doing some
scribbling.
basic bet math on
Yeah.
top of it.
Right, and so that just kind of holds for a second, and this entire time, Carling is just kind of digging at him around, like, I know what you guys are doing. He's inquiring about their card game. But then he goes, it's a hot night. He goes, this is a night for the porch or sleeping and nothing else. And he looks
And
very poignantly.
Sturka just
yes.
just eye fucks the side of Sturka's head in this moment. Is
Yeah. And so throughout this entire conversation, he's just letting him know, like, I know what you're up to. And so then he does this thing where he goes like, may I have a cigarette? And so he reaches for a cigarette. His hand goes over the paper that we now know the equation is on the back of. And Jerry instinctively puts his hand over the paper. And then at a certain point, Carling grabs up the same paper. And it's
See-
another moment.
See, we had a different take on that because when I saw that, it looked to me like Carling was using "Can I have a cigarette" as an excuse to grab that paper.
Yeah.
Because his hand, it looked to me like his hand had gone for those
It's, like,
cigarettes
hovering over
and
the paper.
and just kind of like veered off towards that paper, which is
Mhm.
when Jerry grabbed it and started finishing his math.
Yeah.
I thought that was a blatant like, I know, and I'm gonna grab that paper,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm proven wrong here in just a moment.
So, Carling grabs up said paper, and again, we as the viewer can see the equation. It must be very thick paper because I can't imagine that he wouldn't be able to see the pen on the other side.
It's folded in half and had writing on the side he was looking at.
So he picks it up and we can see the equation, and he's looking at it. He goes, got some fancy bets here. You've lost a lot of money. I guess Sturka's a bit of a gambling man. And he's just sort of digging at him of like, how much would you be willing to gamble or wager or something along those lines? And it's just this entire conversation. You can cut the tension in the room with a knife.
And through the entirety of it, Carling he never stops looming.
Yeah.
At no point is he just like there.
He's not at ease.
He is always this presence.
Yeah.
Looming over the heads of our main characters.
Yep.
Very well done.
Which is very good if he's meant to be a villain. They did that very well.
Indeed.
So he eventually gives up this ruse and says, well, I'm going to go for a walk. I like to walk on hot nights. It helps me sleep. And so then Sturka goes, well, I'll walk you out. And so they get outside and they're on the porch. And then Carling is talking to Sturka and asking him if he believes in the possibility that there are people on other planets. And well, Sturka goes, well, yeah, I have thought that. And he goes, I wonder, do you think you'd be happier on any one of those other planets? He goes, yeah, well, I've thought that too. He goes, yeah, I thought you might. And then he leaves. And that's it. Like, that's what we see from him. So immediately after he leaves, Sturka comes back in, like, okay, it's go time. Like, he's on our tail. We've got to move. Like, we're going to zoom everything up much quicker than we intended. They all pack up and they go. The next thing we see is the car.
Yep, with 5 people crammed into it.
Yep.
A car that is definitely designed to fit at least 5 people, and they somehow managed to look cramped in it.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that was just the angle, like where they had to have everybody so everybody's face could be seen or what, but there's just something weird about that shot that didn't tickle my fancy.
It should have been more spacious than they made it seem. Yeah. So the interesting thing about this car is you hear the motor sound, but it's almost like a hum, like a hovering.
It
sound.
Certainly doesn't sound like what we as people have come to expect from a 1950s model
it's another
car rolling down the road.
Like futuristic, this homage to the futuristic.
Yeah, this.
He in that like the light, the way the light hit the rim, it almost looked like the rims were lit up, like with LED. And that could have just been like the way they had the lighting set up.
I think that was just the lighting, but it
Do you
definitely.
think it was intentional?
I don't know. It's hard to say because there was a lot of things in this episode that, upon first glance, I would have said that was a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I watch it, and the more I've learned about Wild, the more I think, okay, that was probably intentional.
Yeah.
I think the wheels are probably one of those where it's intentional and subtle enough to look like it could have just happened.
It could have just been lit up and hovering as opposed to a normal car on a roadway. I don't know. Whatever the case, super cool. Cool shot. So then they get to the gate and they signal their contact. So Sturka tells Jody to flick the lights on just once, and so she does. And then we see a flashlight from the distance signal back. And as this flashlight gets closer, it's Carling. And he has a flashlight in one hand and a gun in the other. He proceeds to open the gate and then is calmly, he never raises his voice, he never acts frantic, but
he never shows any emotion whatsoever in this entire episode.
It's like a plastered smile, almost like a faint hint of a smile on his face the entirety of this episode. So he opens the gate and then he attempts to get Sturka and Jerry into the car.
After telling them to breathe through their noses.
Yeah.
Stand still and breathe through your nose.
I was wondering about that, if it may have been like a play on calling them mouth breathers or something. Just because of the way it was worded.
I don't know if mouth breather was a typical insult back then.
I don't know.
I hope it was, and I hope that was a Carling, just one more Carling dig at these two, because I want that to be the case. I don't know if mouth breathers was something people referred to other people as.
I don't know either. I like to think of it as that, so
Indeed.
We'll continue to think of it.
I'm going to start telling people to breathe through their nose.
Yeah, calmly. So he gets them over to the car and says, I need you two in the front seat, and then tries to tell the ladies to get out of the back.
Because he has an appointment with these two gentlemen.
Right, and they have to go. So he comes over to the passenger side, and Jody...
Who is our knight in shining armor?
Jody is watching him. And I rewound it and slowed it down a couple of times to just really get this. She was watching the gun in his hand, but she was also watching his movements. And when he turned slightly, she opens this door and completely disarms him. Like, she opens the door and his gun flies, and it was very overdramatic. But the point is, she disarmed him by opening a door.
She put her weight into it. Like, this did not appear to be like okay,
bump.
Now, sweetheart, you're going to open the door, and when it touches his arm, he's going to flail about and drop his gun. Like, she put some weight into it. She put some
definitely
force behind that
threw
door.
her shoulder into it.
Yeah, I mean the gun drop was over dramatic. And
Yeah, and
the first time we see emotion on Carling's face in this entire episode.
and then they grapple him, and that was great because that was also super over the top.
God, he dented the roof of that car. Like he dove onto the roof. He belly flopped onto that roof, like Rob Van Dam drunkenly falling off a cage. And just left a body imprint across the roof of this car while he grabbed a man and attempted to choke him and did nothing.
He seemingly succeeded because this
Jerry
wonderful,
smashed him in the face with a gun.
This wonderful. Oh, I didn't see that. I thought he actually succeeded in getting the choke on him.
No, he was holding him, and Carling did start making gagging noises despite the arm being across his chest.
Sure.
But Jerry reaches up and hits him with the gun.
So he did
which
clock him with the gun.
Yeah.
Okay, I was wondering how he ended up being passed out. So he was rendered unconscious. They drive in, they get to the ship, and they as they get to the ship, they are as they get to the ship, these guards are coming up the ramp, and they just very comically, like old school, pow pow, knock them out.
I would not have been surprised to see a wham or a pow pop up on the screen just before it flashes back and suddenly Sturka is dressed like fucking Batman.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah. It was that level of fantastic 50s.
Jerry's
comedy.
kick. Jerry's kick 4 feet to the side of the guard's head.
Yep.
Camera was angled right.
Right.
Jerry's foot was far too small
To make
compared
that
to the
happen.
rest of that scene, but got the point. I think Jerry's foot actually like goes through the guard's head momentarily when he
Yeah.
kicks him.
Yep.
Based on that angle, it was
Yeah.
phenomenal.
It was great.
Absolutely phenomenal.
So when they get inside the ship, we see that it is in fact a spaceship.
It-
Surprise,
Oh my god! The
surprise.
first time we see the spaceship,
Mhm.
we're going a little long, so I'm going to make this quick. But the first time we see the spaceship is when they pull up to the gate, and Jerry says, "There it is," pointing it out to Sturka.
Mhm.
And what we as a viewer see is like a fucking cardboard cutout
Of a flying saucer.
of a flying saucer is like double-sided taped to a blackboard
It's great.
off
It's
in the
so great.
distance. It is the most ridiculous practical effect I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's awesome.
But once we see the inside, they've put some work into they've put some work into the inside of the
Mhm.
spacecraft.
The aircraft. So they're sitting down now, and Sturka tells Jerry that they're headed for the Bright Star. And
Was
it's
it
another
was it 11 million miles?
Mhm. But it's another practical effect because he's like essentially looking at what we would consider a porthole. And you see
Yeah.
like 4 stars in the very opening, like Twilight Zone starscape that happens at the beginning of every episode. There's just these 4 stars that are there, and
but
he
there's
says,
a brighter one.
"We're going for the Bright Star, the 3rd planet from the sun, a planet called Earth." Dun dun dun.
Ladies and gentlemen, drop your mic.
Okay, can I just say, I was genuinely surprised by this.
As well you should have been. They did a good job of giving us no context. I don't know if it was that they did a good job of giving us no context, or they did such a bad job of giving us context.
Mhm.
Because essentially, what we are watching humans
Right.
living human lives, trying to escape a human disaster
Yeah.
that humans do, only to find out that the humans
Aren't
they're
human?
not humans.
Yeah.
They're aliens.
It was amazing.
If you weren't surprised by it, I would be surprised.
This was one that was like, "Oh, well done, guys. Well done."
Yeah, you got me. You got me, Rod.
And then closing narration. Wrapped up, packaged beautifully, as
Indeed.
always,
Rod never does it bad.
for Sturka and his family. It is the eve of the beginning in the Twilight Zone. So they open it with the eve of the end and
Yes.
close it with the eve of the beginning, knowing that they're going to planet Earth.
keeping in mind that they actually mentioned in the episode that they don't know if the ship will make it to Earth.
Well, yeah.
They don't know if it'll make it to where they're going because it's 11 million miles.
Yeah.
And this is the first time this ship has ever been flown outside the atmosphere. They're not even entirely sure it'll make it out of the atmosphere.
Or
but
that the
as we know,
pilot is qualified.
or that the pilot is qualified to get them there and to land it.
Yeah.
They're letting a lot ride on this ship. And I really hope they made it to Earth. They earned it.
Of their planet.
I just hope we don't someday find them floating around in space, frozen in a time capsule that is a flying saucer made out of construction paper.
My worst nightmare. It's horrible.
Well, at least you have nightmares about reasonable things.
Space. I hate space.
Where can people find you?
I am at its_Bethany on Twitter.
Bam, you can get me at Connor Dare. That's at KONRDARE on Twitter. We got.
And you can find us on the Wonder With Us feed at WWUcast on Twitter.
We've also got the Facebook, which is Wander With Us.
And I am monitoring that daily. Let me know if you're following. Leave me a comment.
And again, I know we're kind of griping on this, the iTunes thing.
Guys, it's so important.
It is incredibly important to get ranking moved up. So if you're enjoying the show, if you like what you hear, you want to keep hearing it. If you could just, it don't have to do much. If you got an iTunes account, you just go over there, give a rating, give a quick comment, just something to let iTunes know, hey, this is a thing to get moved up.
This is a thing that's worth our time and your time.
And it would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah.
Because we want to keep doing it.
Yeah.
The easiest way for us to keep doing it
is to have your support.
Is to have some support for it. So, iTunes, comment, rating, the Anchor account, if you want to go over there, you can go to the Anchor account, give us a comment, rating.
Yep.
We could use some reviews on the Facebook page.
That would be fantastic.
So if you're liking it, if you're not, if you want to talk, if you just want to tell us what the hell we're doing wrong and make fun of us for all the information we got wrong, we're not scientists, folks. We're people watching a TV show. So tell us what we got wrong, tell us what we got right, tell us what you like, what you don't. Whether that's Facebook, Twitter, obviously Twitter, tweeting is easy.
Yeah.
So tweet at us, hit us up on Facebook, hit us up on iTunes.
Please and thank you.
All that stuff.
And as always, thank you for listening.
I've been Connor.
And I'm still Bethany.
We'll see you next time. I would breathe into the mic on the fucking outro.